Hi, everyone. My name is Matthew Hewson. I'm the president of the Broward County Canes community. I'd like to welcome everyone tonight on behalf of the Broward Canes and our executive board. Our Broward Canes represent over 15,000 alumni, and even though we'd hope to be doing this in person, we look forward to engaging with you virtually, getting to know you, and providing you great programs this fall. We're thrilled to have alumni, family, and friends of the U from all over the country joining us tonight. And I'm very excited to hear from our esteemed panel. Before we get started, we're going to do some Zoom housekeeping. And so let's go through some of the logistics to make sure that everyone gets the most out of our time together tonight. First of all, the chat feature is going to be available, so feel free to introduce yourself, add comments, chat with us throughout the program. If you have questions, use the Q&A feature located at the bottom of the screen, and we'll do our best to get through as many questions as possible. So now let's go ahead and get the program started. I'm honored to introduce our distinguished University of Miami faculty and moderator tonight, Dean Quelch. John Quelch became Dean of the University of Miami Patty and Alan Herbert Business School on July 1, 2017. He is the Leonard M. Miller University Professor and also serves as the university's Vice Provost for Executive Education. The University of Miami is incredibly fortunate to have Dean Quelch lead our renowned Miami Herbert Business School. Thank you, Dean Quelch. Please take it away.
Well, thank you very much, Matthew. Good evening to everybody. This is John Quelch here. I'm in my office at the Patty and Alan Herbert Business School. Like to thank, first of all, Ashley on our side for helping organize the event through our Alumni Relations Department of the Business School, along with Debbie, Christine, Christy, and Carolina, all of whom have helped to put this great event together. Great to be back with the Broward Canes, albeit virtually. We're going to talk tonight a little bit about the COVID situation and the impact on South Florida's economy. We have a panel discussion, 2 faculty members and 2 prominent local alumni. We're going to talk about real estate. We're going to talk about healthcare, small businesses, and the impact of COVID on communities, families, and individuals. Let me first of all introduce the panelists. First of all, we're going to hear from Professor Andrea Hewson, who's a professor of finance at our school. And our students have had the pleasure of learning from Andrea since 1982. Of course, many of you know that her father was also a professor of finance at our school. She's been academic director of real estate programs since 2009 and teaches real estate finance at the undergraduate as well as the graduate level. Secondly, we'll then hear from Steve Ullman. Steve is the department chair and professor of health management and policy at our school, amongst other positions that he's held at the University of Miami, including a stint as vice provost. Dr. Ullman's also an authority board member for the Miami-Dade Health Facilities, and his research focuses on integration of healthcare management, economics, law, government policy and regulation, healthcare systems, long-term healthcare, etc. Then we have 2 terrific alumni who are joining us. So first, I'll introduce Stephen Good. Stephen is a 2000 graduate of the U. He's a member of the Citizens Board and is the Director of Business Development for 1847 Financial, South Florida, with 20 years of experience in financial services. He's also a trustee, national trustee of the National Association of Insurance and Financial Advisors. And then finally, we have Brian Etzkowitz. Brian is a 1989 Kane graduate, holds a bachelor's in international finance and marketing from our school. He is the Chief Member Advancement Officer for Goodwill Industries International, in which capacity he leads the member advancement team in supporting the membership to strengthen their mission, as well as international development strategies and operational support. Interestingly, in 2014, U.S. Labor Secretary Tom Perez appointed him to the Advisory Committee on Increasing Competitive Integrated Employment for Individuals with Disabilities. So, as we often like to do in these events, a blend of our faculty and our former students, our alumni. That's part of the community proposition of being a lifetime Cane. And first of all, let me hand it over to Andrea for a few comments about the impact of the virus on the real estate market. And we have a couple of questions already, Andrea, that you may want to blend into your remarks. You probably are covering them already. One related to commercial and versus residential real estate, current impact, ongoing prospects, and the second related to what's the future of the condominium market.
Thank you very much, John. It's great to be here. Welcome, everybody. I wish I was with you in person. One of the first things I have to note is that real estate on the Coral Gables campus has changed dramatically over the last 14 months or so. And the background picture behind me is the brand new dorms in the student housing village that is actually a mixed-use real estate development in that it has student housing, it has some retail, and it has a lot of service areas for students, and it is absolutely beautiful. So the next time you are down in the Gables, please drive by and see. You can't see the roof, but even has a green roof with a beautiful planting growing up there. It is no understatement to say that the virus has changed the commercial real estate market in a short time, even more so than a series of financial crises going all the way back to the 80s, which is when I first started studying real estate. And those crises did not have anywhere near as dramatic an impact as COVID did. One of the shifts that I think you will see, and it deals partly with the question that John mentioned, is we are starting to see almost a lack of distinction between the residential real estate of someone's home and the space that they used to occupy in an office. One of the sectors of the market that has really actually benefited from COVID is the single family residential market, because there has been a movement of people away from the sort of high density development you see in condominiums, and a great demand for people who want the space and the protection of a single family home with enough space to create an office in the home. And that then places your employer in a position of either having too much office space or being able to reorient or sort of create more flexibility in their office space. And I have not seen anybody who believes that that trend is going to change. Over time, I think we'll see some younger people back in the office, some new hires who are back in the office to get their sense of culture where they're working. But then as you become a more senior person, you will start to spend more and more of your time in your home office rather than in your typical office. So that's changing the need for residential space. I think another thing that we've seen on the condominium side is that there is less demand from foreign investors to make purchases of condominiums in South Florida, and they also are generating their interest into the single family home market. So we're seeing a shift, another shift out of condominiums from that point. The third thing that I think we've seen is a huge change in retail, and the idea that almost anything you want you can have delivered to your house. Amazon drones have been given permission to fly, so in the next 12 months we'll probably be able to look up and see packages being delivered in dense urban areas without the need of delivery trucks. And I sort of find that a little scary, but it's just one more step along our evolution in this business. John, you're muted.
Is there any part of the real estate market other than single family residential that is benefiting, or is that really the only bright spot? What about warehouse distribution, and what's happening with shopping malls as well?
Obviously, warehouses in the industrial segment has been a great beneficiary, especially in locations that are very close in. I have heard examples up in Broward County, some of the lakes that were used as a source of rock for concrete in the 50s and 60s that are now, kind of near I-95 and the Turnpike, are being filled in to create new land for industrial space that is very close to the transportation arteries to get delivery for that last mile to become a little more efficient. For retail, this obviously means that you have to find different ways to actually touch your customer. It has to be something that can be ordered online and delivered, ordered online, picked up in store, purchased in store. They call it omni-channel retailing. And sort of a last point that everybody wants to know is who's big enough to compete with Amazon, or is anybody big enough to compete with Amazon in the retail space? And it appears that Walmart is going to enter that ring and try to do battle with Amazon. And they're one of the few firms that probably have enough capital to do that. What this means for our high street retail, where you and I would go for medical appointments or yoga or fresh produce, is that even those stores have to be much more efficient at providing services for us and getting us back into their space when those spaces finally do open.
Terrific, great coverage. Thanks, Andrea. So let's go to Steve, if we may, next. Obviously, Steve has a 40-year plus perspective on the healthcare sector in South Florida, and what do you see as the headline impact, Steve?
It's interesting. I've been teaching the concept of situations like this for pandemics for literally going back 25, 30 years. And actually, it's been an exercise in my class to have teams of students running healthcare systems and saying, okay, now you have a pandemic coming at you, and how do you react to that, and how do you respond to that? Both my healthcare executive MBAs and also my undergraduates, I had them do an exercise like this. And in fact, I read them an article before this happened, literally about 5 months ago, an article that appeared in September 2019 that said, be aware, we will at one point in the near future have a pandemic coming at us, and it will be significant, and how do we react? And here it is. Never thinking that I would be teaching something that would actually be occurring like this. So actually, there was an article in this morning Sun Sentinel, the timing is impeccable, unfortunately, of a breakdown in relationships between Florida Blue Insurance Company, not-for-profit, and Memorial Healthcare Systems, another not-for-profit organization. There's a perfect ramification of what we see going on in healthcare right now. Again, we've been bombarded with some of the COVID aspects of it at the macro level, the policy aspects, but let me talk a little bit about it at the micro level, at the community level, at the Broward level. So one of the things that we're seeing is our healthcare systems have seen a significant drop in revenue. The drop in revenue has been a function of a drop in elective surgical procedures. Okay, one can say, well, we can put off the knee replacement and the hip replacement. That's not going to be life-threatening. But it's also been a significant drop-off in emergency department visits for things like stroke and heart attack. And that means that not only is that a revenue impact on the healthcare systems, but also a secondary effect on health for the population, because people are deciding or choosing when they're having the stroke symptoms not to go into the emergency department, concerned that they will get COVID. And so as a result, you don't have the opportunity to do the clot busters, for example, for a stroke or a significant response to a heart attack. Cancer procedures are way down. And that is also of concern to healthcare providers because, again, people have been fearful, or the healthcare systems themselves have had to put off people coming in for concern about risk of this. So that's another aspect. So not only are we seeing cost impacts of this, but we're seeing secondary quality impacts in terms of quality of life. Then you add to that also additional bad debt for healthcare systems right now, because we've seen a drop off in people because they've lost their jobs, and we're a service sector economy, primarily down in South Florida. As our people have lost their jobs, they've also lost their health insurance, but they're still getting sick. And so then they come into our healthcare systems not able to pay very significant and very expensive care. Now, the CARES money, the federal grant, was a partial bailout or support for healthcare systems and healthcare facilities to get them over this hump. But it's only estimated to cover about 60% of the financial hit on healthcare systems. Definitely a help, but only a 60% impact in terms of that. So that's the healthcare system aspect of it. But then you also have the insurance aspect of it as well. And why did this break down, for example, and this is just one example that will be sort of ongoing of this breakdown between Florida Blue, for example, and Memorial Healthcare. Well, insurance providers by federal requirement are to absorb the cost of the tests. And the cost of the tests are not insignificant. They range between $1,200 and $3,000 per COVID test. Government says insurance companies must provide that. Plus, they've also now have to bear the cost of people who are in the healthcare system, in the healthcare facilities, using extremely expensive ICU beds and ventilators. These will cost, in terms of the patient care, hundreds of thousands of dollars to the insurance companies. None of this was budgeted for the year by these insurance companies, so they're hit significantly as well. And so as a result, what they're having to do is figure out how they can cut costs, especially because the only way you can negotiate for commercial insurance contracts is by showing a significantly competitive rate for your services. So these are sort of the, if you will, the negative aspects. Now they're tell you a little bit of the innovations that's coming out, which is sort of the little bit of the silver lining, if you will, in terms of this. One is the growth of telemedicine and the acceptance of telemedicine to a much greater extent, to the point that Medicare now is covering telemedicine. So this was a significant push for a new technology. Hospitals are rethinking how they are structured as supports for communication between patients and family members, which have been impacted significantly. So maybe I'll stop there because I'm sure there are going to be questions, but that's just a basic aspect of what's going on right now.
Steve, just to connect what Andrea was saying with what you're saying, with a lot of people out of work, can you hear me?
Yes, I can now.
Yeah, a lot of people out of work, a lot of people working remotely, either willingly or unwillingly. There's also a mental health aspect to this crisis as well. Could you talk to that a little bit?
Oh, very much so. The stresses on the nursing profession, the stresses on the physicians, the stresses on custodial work has been quite significant. People are scared of coming to work. I wish I could read you, I don't have the time, an email I got a number of months ago from one of my alums who was a physician in New York City. And he was basically breaking down. He was literally crying, going in saying, I was never trained for this. This is something I never perceived, and I'm watching my patients dying around me. It still gives me chills from when I read that email. But this is what we're seeing also. So a significant impact on the mental health of our workers in healthcare right now.
Okay. All right. Thanks, Steve. So let's turn now to Stephen. with hopefully a good perspective on the financial impacts on the South Florida economy. Stephen?
I appreciate that, Dean Quelch. And I will say, as a marine science and biology guy, anytime the College of Arts and Science gets the opportunity to crash a business school dais, it's a good thing. So I'll take it as a personal victory here to get the opportunity to speak with you all tonight. What I find really interesting is there's two very separate realities out there that people are dealing with, unfortunately. And so much of it is driven by, are you employed or do you serve in the big corporate world, or are you employed and do you serve in the small mom and pop type world? And that drives a lot of this separation. I think that there's some things that you can do to work kind of to it and through it. And I do believe, to that mental health thing, that mindset plays a big role in that. And I give you an example. There's two financial advisors that I know, and similar tenure in the industry, similar time, similar skill sets, even similar markets that they work in. One of them, she actually in May finished her best year she's ever had. So the first 5 months into the year, with everything going on, she's had her best time ever helping clients. And another individual, again, very similar. Here we are in September, and he hasn't even done what he normally does by the end of the first quarter. And when you talk to them, it's interesting to hear, because with her, there's no challenge that's unconquerable. There's no problem that she can't solve. She's got a way. She's going to find a way. There's a solution. And when you work with him, every anthill is Mount Everest that he has to go and climb. So I do believe that mindset is playing a role, right, for better or for worse, and how we go through this. But there are bigger issues that mindset alone isn't going to solve. And certainly we get asked all the time, right, why is there's this huge dichotomy between what we see happening on Wall Street and what we see happening in Main Street? And I think so much of that goes back to that core again of where are you backed by, and who are you ultimately working for? And the best example I can give is, if you're employed or if you're your local McDonald's, they're probably not going to shut their doors. The access to capital they have, the resources they have, those kind of things, that they're going to be able to weather it. The local diner, the local mom and pop, they don't have those same resources. They don't have those same capabilities. And that's where I think a lot of their problems are stemming from. And certainly there's a lot smarter people than me that have a better solution or policies that can be put in place. But that really is the challenge as I see it, that so many people are facing, is if you're in that big company environment, or you're serving that big company environment, you really have a much better chance to weather out these storms than the true small business owner. But that being said, it's so interesting to see how unnormal this recession is, right? There wasn't a big economic event that brought us to it. There wasn't a big challenge that took us there economically. In fact, we had a pretty good economy leading into this. Most experts were constantly saying, next year is the year that the recession starts, and then that year ended, we still didn't have it, and the next year will start, and that year. So we constantly kept putting off that recession that we all expected, but it has still come about, but it's come about in a very strange way. And an example I give is I've got a client that owns a pest control company, and he has 6 employees right now. And when we were talking the other day, he said, I could hire another dozen and still not meet the demand that I have. His words were, right, if you see the ant as you walk out the door in the morning, you don't really think of it for the rest of the day. But when you see the ant for breakfast, lunch, and dinner, you're calling him to say, hey, I need to get these bugs out of my house, right? So here's this guy that, as a small business owner, he can't keep pace with the demand for what he has. And then his next door neighbor, his next bay neighbor in his office park, is a graphics design company. They do vehicle wraps and advertisements and those kind of things. And this company, same economic environment, same everything, they're printing those yard signs, that the happy birthday, happy anniversaries, just so they can meet payroll. So there's not even a global issue that you can look at and say, here's your problem, here's your challenge, here's how economically we can go out and solve it. And I think that's what's created a lot of the fear and a lot of the concern, especially with the small business owners that I talk to, is that they're thankful if they're the lucky ones that are still good, but if they're not the lucky one, they're really struggling with how do they overcome and what do they do. And in my mind, really, there's two things for folks to be thinking about. You know, as a small business owner, you know, we've heard a couple of folks say that transformation to digital as best as you can makes a huge difference. Even for us in our firm, I have one advisor, if we go back to January, that consistently would work with his clients electronically, right, via Zoom or whatever the medium was. And, you know, here we are now in September. I've shut down my agencies. Our offices aren't open until January of 2021. So the only way for my advisors to meet with their clients is electronically. So you have to, if there's an ability to adapt to digital, you certainly have to adapt to it. But from the planning perspective, you know, emotion is the biggest enemy of a good investment. So having a plan and sticking to that plan and having that mindset, the positive mindset of, you know, we've weathered things like this in the past, and we certainly will again. I think that mindset really rings true and hopefully will carry us through what should be a turned corner, or hopefully is a turned corner at this point in time. But I think that's really the biggest thing I would say is that, you know, we weathered worse, that there's an opportunity here to continue to build and to continue to grow if you continue to build on yourself and build within the business model that you have.
Stephen, thanks very much. A couple of people have asked follow-up questions, kind of the question you would expect. Why is the stock market so high in the face of this recession? And do you expect equities to continue to be so much in favor? And we know that cash, of course, delivers no return at the moment, but the bond markets also seem to be very much out of favor as well. Many people, I'm sure, have been advised, at least when they get to a certain age, to go 50-50. Is that what you're telling your clients, 50 bonds, 50 stocks, or are you switching your proportions?
Yeah, and obviously every situation is different, and you know, it's kind of like buying one size fits all clothing, right? I've yet to meet the person in my life that one size fits all clothing actually fits them. So the, you know, generic, hey, it's 60-40, 50-50, and the splits that don't always work. But what I would tell you is what I see a lot of time, and what I see a lot is people that are starting to say, hey, you know what, maybe I need more guarantees. You know, as a industry and as a country, we really got away from pension plans and those kind of things because the risk is so high for that employer, but it hurts the end employee tremendously when they don't have that guaranteed income stream. So, you know, there's lots of acts that are out there. The Secure Act that just went through last year, everybody will start to see come January of next year a change where on your 401k statement, it will show you what an anticipated income stream would be out of the balance of your 401k. So I think that's what we see more than anything. Isn't necessarily the change in investment philosophy as much as it is people realizing that they need the guaranteed income or they need to have an income stream lined up for themselves when they hit retirement. Because to your point, Dean Quelch, right, the bonds, the returns just aren't necessarily there anymore for the individual. Certainly at the institutional level, if you've got, you know, a couple $100 million lying around, that you can get good rates, but for most mom and pop, you don't have that ability. So I think it's a matter of starting to be creative and starting to figure out how do you craft a plan that gives you more income, because ultimately that's what we're trying to achieve.
Yeah, fair enough, Stephen. So just want to remind everybody to please send in some more questions. We've got a few lined up already, but we're looking for more. Now let's turn to Brian. I thought it was absolutely fascinating that we have someone from Goodwill Industries with us this evening, because that's not the most obvious organization to have represented on this kind of a panel, but from a community point of view, I think it's, you know, hugely positive that we have Brian with us. So fascinated to hear what the impact of COVID has been on your activities, Brian.
Thanks, Dean. And it has been interesting, and it's really been a divergence of both opportunity and peril. So you've got, you know, January and February, we're off to a great start. I actually just gave a presentation to our membership today that showed, you know, everything was on the uptick, and then, you know, March hit and it was the nosedive. So with Goodwill, we're, you know, a nonprofit, and our social enterprise is funded through retail stores. So when COVID hit, everybody basically, like the rest of the country, whether you're for-profit or not, shuttered their doors. And us, our mission is trying to help people train for and get jobs. And so basically our funding stream dried up, and the need for those services just shot up through the roof. And if you look at the people that were impacted most by COVID, the people that, you know, lost their jobs and were in those service jobs, they're people of color, low-income folks, and people that don't have high educational attainment. So those are the people that are most at risk, that needed our services, and we had to shut, you know, because of social distancing, we shut our career services down across the country. So what the opportunity was for us to, you know, embrace technology and learn how to basically do consultation virtually and engage with the people we serve virtually, and really ask our partners that we have to level up. We've got a great partnership with Indeed, so being able to connect folks to work opportunities and helping them find jobs with our Indeed partnership was a great benefit. And then our partners at Walmart, both through their own need, because the demand at Walmart shot through the roof because they were deemed essential, they were looking for workers, and we were able to provide a necessary pipeline for them. But it's really been difficult for nonprofits. One of the things that we look at in my office is days liquidity on hand. So again, when revenue dried up, you know, you start looking at the liquidity piece, and we had members that were talking about bankruptcy, about mergers, and just being able to remain a going concern. So the benefit was PPP funding came in and really helped people out. So, you know, as the stores and retail environment has been able to open up, we have seen an uptick, which has allowed, again, the liquidity piece to have some more cash infusion to run the business and to run those mission services. So it has been it's been a great lesson learned for everybody, because throughout everything, it's like, you know, the gravy train's always going to keep going, and people have gotten loose with their reserve requirements and things like that. So it's really been a slap in the head to get people to pay attention to those reserve requirements and pay attention to things that we harp on a regular basis. One of the other interesting notes of with our disability population, especially if you look in South Florida and the Goodwill in South Florida, one of their biggest ways of engaging in their community impact is employing people with disabilities. And the Goodwill in Miami, they actually have a sewing operation where they sew uniforms for armed forces. They, unfortunately, they do the internment flags also for the armed services. But, you know, it's a big warehouse that lots of people with disabilities running sewing machines. It's a pretty intricate sewing operations. And because of social distancing, and you've got people with, you know, they're at risk with multiple modalities. So they weren't coming to work, and they were staying at home, which then puts additional burden on their caregivers as to they can't go to work. So it's just been, you know, a cascade of poor events for organizations that are trying to help people most in need.
Brian, thank you so much. Could I just ask, I'm not sure whether or not you received any support or your employees received any support from the administration under the CARES Act or the PPP program. Could you just explain how that worked if you did?
Yep. So Goodwill is made up of autonomous organizations. So there's Goodwill in South Florida, there's Goodwill in West Palm, and many of our members applied for PPP. And as the membership organization, Goodwill Industries International, we also received PPP. But there's size requirements with that, and if you're over X amount, you don't qualify for PPP. So they also engaged in the employee retention tax credit. So all of those are functions of that CARES Act. So yeah, they were able to do that. And that was a huge lift when it came to liquidity piece and helping people maintain through the shutdown.
Great, thank you. So let's have some more questions sent in, please, if you've got anything on your mind. I'm just going to take a few that have come in already. First one for Andrea. What about defaults on office leases? And I guess defaults across various sectors of the real estate industry. Where do you think the biggest problems are going to be?
Well, first, let me start with the second question first. One area, really the only area where we have seen a significant amount of default so far happens to be the hotel sector, and especially hotels that are not part of a big chain, that don't have that corporate structure to supply liquidity and capital. And many of those hotels are part of something called a commercial mortgage-backed security, where the hotels are pledged as collateral for a mortgage, but then the investors in those mortgages are spread out across the country. So it is very difficult if your hotel or your real estate property is part of a CMBS pool. You don't necessarily have a single lender to negotiate with or to ask for help or ask for a little more time or some forbearance. So we're starting to see some significant defaults on the hotel side in the CMBS market. Most of the rest of the market, I think, is sort of in a wait and see mode still. There are occasional retail defaults and bankruptcies, but most of these are chains that were in financial trouble before the virus hit. And we can all think of JCPenney's and how long have we been waiting for that to happen. JCPenney's is an interesting case because it has very valuable real estate, either owned or under contract, and big, large positions in malls, some of which are very successful. And it will be interesting to see if Amazon or some of the big internet retailers can get a hold of that space and use it for distribution instead of a visit type go-to retail. So that is something that'll be interesting to see.
Another quick question, Andrea, for you. Is there anything different in terms of the trends in South Florida versus broader national trends?
I think that in South Florida, we are still a very, very optimistic market. I'm a finance professor by training, and so I spend a lot of time working with economic indexes. And we have stock indexes and price indexes, and an index that I watch a good bit that I didn't even think about until 18 months ago is something called the U-Haul index, which you can of course find on U-Haul's website. And the U-Haul index is a geographic representation of where one-way U-Haul rentals are being accessed and then being dropped off. So it is a very, very good way to see where people are moving. And in response to some of the changes in the Tax Cut and Jobs Act of 2017, some changes in federal income taxes, we are seeing people of all different wealth segments moving to Florida. Some are moving to South Florida, many more are actually moving to Central Florida, to the Orlando, Kissimmee area. In Orlando, it actually outweighed Texas as the most inbound location of U-Haul drop-offs in 2019. Texas has been a destination for people moving from California, where we're seeing people moving down from the Northeast to South Florida. So there is a belief that South Florida will survive. We have this influx of population from other parts of the country to support our real estate markets. And some of that will come to South Florida and also the rest of the state.
Okay. So let me go to Steve and paraphrasing one of our alumni questions. Do you think that the COVID crisis is going to make it more likely that we'll see universal health care coverage, single payer insurance, or will there not be a long-term impact of that nature?
I don't personally see that there'll be a long-term impact in terms of how our structures are set. We have a long history of employer-based health insurance. It dates back to 1945 in terms of the push for that. And actually, in my classes, I talk about the historical perspective of how we developed our current healthcare system. So with a 75-year history of employer-based healthcare insurance, I don't see that going anywhere. Having said that, be aware that we really are a mixed system. We have 8 different healthcare insurance structures here in the US. We have the employer-based health insurance. It's about 50% of the population that gets that. But then we have Medicare, traditional. Then we have Medicare Advantage, which is a sort of a hybrid of private and government Medicare. And then we have Medicaid. And then we have the military healthcare system. And we have the VA healthcare system. We have the Native American healthcare system. And we have this system for the indigent, which means charity care. So it's like all there in all these different pieces, which actually represent sort of amalgam of systems that we see all around the world, all here at one time in the US.
Okay, thanks, Steve. Perhaps a question for Stephen, though Andrea may also have a view on it. One of our alumni is asking about likely trends in home mortgage rates. Will they stay pretty low, pretty much the same for the upcoming months? And will that cause housing prices, including condo prices, to continue to rise?
You know, here's how I'll answer that from the interest rate side, only because I tell this story all the time. I was in a meeting in May of last year where the gentleman, where his entire job for Morgan Stanley is predicting interest rates. And he sat there in the meeting and said, listen, you know, as we approach 3%, I think we can safely say that the times of, you know, 1.5% to 2% interest rates are basically gone in our lifetime. I'd be surprised if we even see 2.5% anymore in our lifetime. And about 60 days after he made that statement, we were back down almost under 2. And now here we are a year later, right, significantly under 1. So I gave up reading a crystal ball, because you end up just eating glass when you try and look into a crystal ball too much, right? But what I would say is this, is that if you look at what's driving a lot of it right now, it's supply more than anything else that tends to be driving, at least on the home price side, what's going on. Interest rates are of course driving that, but there's so few homes that are on the market. In fact, I was laughing earlier today. I was talking with a neighbor who's a realtor, and she said, you know, it's World War III just to get a home, to be able to list a home, because if you can list it, you can sell it. And that's all it really takes at this point in time. So I don't I don't know where interest rates are going to be, because I think we still don't know what the other side of COVID looks like, in terms of when does the vaccine come, how quickly, how fast can we mass produce it, how accepted is the vaccine when it comes in, to know, to be able to project that. But I think from a South Florida standpoint, it seems very different than 2006. From a real estate bubble standpoint, at least to my layman's eyes. I'm sure Andrea's got a much more academic and probably correct opinion than what I'm going to share. But from my opinion, it doesn't feel like 2006. Again, there wasn't an arbitrary run up that led us to where we are. There was unforeseen circumstances that brought us on to the challenges that we have. But I think we'll weather this pretty decently on the real estate side.
Andrea, do you want to quickly comment?
Certainly, I think the Federal Reserve has shown a conviction to do whatever it takes to make sure that anybody who needs capital has access to it, be it corporate, be it financial institution, or be it individual borrower. So it is certainly not a lack of mortgage financing that would hold anybody back from buying a home. I have also seen the lenders be actually pretty good at risk assessment and underwriting. They're being very careful with who they grant mortgages to and how much in a mortgage they grant. But still, people have so much pent-up demand for that single-family house that they perceive to be safer, that you're right, it's almost impossible to find homes for sale. Even the home builders who are trying to build new homes as quickly as they can are finding constraints on their supply chain. A lot of the materials that go into that supply chain are coming from overseas, and some of that distribution network has broken down. So we may see a rise in construction costs coming in the next 6 months or so, and that would impact both new single family, and that will be on the supply chain side. And those are typically temporary. We're pretty efficient importers here, but that's where there seems to be a bottleneck at this point, as far as it's hard to create enough new homes to satisfy demand.
Thank you, Andrea. Final question for Brian. Brian, if there were 2 or 3 things that Goodwill Industries most needs at the moment, either in terms of what we can do as individuals, or needs in terms of support from corporations and or the government, what are those needs?
So we can start, as with the folks that are employers out there, that if you have a company, I would say connect with Goodwill to create a pipeline to hire folks. Second part is what every nonprofit will tell you, is that everybody loves cash. So make your donations. The federal government this year made some changes to the charitable tax piece, so it becomes a little bit more favorable to make those donations. So hopefully Steve will back me up on that. And so make your donations to whether it's Goodwill or to your favorite nonprofit. But for us, it is about jobs, and it is about giving people opportunity. So if you have the opportunity to hire somebody, or if you're looking for talent, connect with your local Goodwill.
All right, thanks a lot, Brian. Well, I think we're at 6:20. Thanks to all of our panelists, and let me now hand you back with pleasure to our host, Matthew.
Wow, fantastic conversation. Thank you, Dean Quelch, Dr. Hewson, Dr. Allman, Stephen, Brian. Thank everyone and everyone for joining us for such an important and engaging conversation. Again, much appreciated. Before we close, I want to mention some upcoming fall events hosted by the Alumni Association. So join us this month for football for a virtual pregame celebration before the UAB versus game on September 10th, and also before the FSU versus Miami game on September 26th. So these celebrations are going to include trivia, door prizes, special appearances by former athletes. So it's going to be a lot of fun. Encourage you to look out for the registration details coming soon. Also, and finally, we have another Cane conversation hosted by the Chicago Canes community, showcasing the Rosenthal School of Marine and Atmospheric Sciences in partnership with Shed Aquarium on Wednesday, September 23rd. So please look out for the official invitation and more info later this month. And now my favorite part as we close out these Cane conversations, I thank everyone again who joined us. I hope you enjoyed the program. I'm going to ask all participants to throw up the U and go Canes.